Some stories never truly end. They keep living, transforming, being reborn in other languages. The Epic of Gilgamesh is exactly that kind of story. Inscribed on clay tablets in cuneiform script roughly 4,000 years ago, this narrative is still being read today, still being questioned. Because the question it asks has never changed. How does a mortal human face this reality? Welcome to Rumasius, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Here is what makes this video different. We read Gilgamesh not as a tale of heroism, but as humanity's first story of maturation. Most videos tell you what is written on the tablets. We ask you this: who wrote this epic, and why? What age of chaos gave birth to these words? And why does a sentence carved into clay 4,000 years ago still touch something in us today? You already know Gilgamesh's search for immortality, his loss of Enkidu, the serpent that stole the plant. But in this video, we will also look at this. Why is that serpent a serpent? Why did this epic take its final form in that particular century? And which other Mesopotamian texts ask the same question as this one? 4 sections, 4 different doors, 1 story. Gilgamesh, the hero who questions death and seeks immortality, is the legendary king of Uruk, an ancient site in the south of Mesopotamia. This ancient city, located in what is today Iraq, was one of the largest cities in the world in the 3rd millennium BCE. Surrounded by walls 3 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide, once stood a place inhabited by at least 20,000 people. Today, only ruins remain where all of that once stood, ruins that have long since merged with the earth. But what remains is not only stone and clay. What remains is a word that rose from this soil. And that word is still speaking. Gilgamesh, according to tradition, is the 5th king to sit on the throne of Uruk after the Great Flood. But in this epic, you do not encounter him as a king. You encounter him as a human being in the process of transformation. At the outset, he is tyrannical, selfish, unjust toward his people. That hardness gradually breaks, turning into a journey, across the landscape and through the interior of a person. Seen from the outside, it is an adventure stretching toward the mountains of Lebanon, toward the Zagros Range. Seen from within, it is the story of becoming a complete human being. That is why the Epic of Gilgamesh is not merely a legend. In ancient Mesopotamia, this text was described as Namkuzu, the knowledge of secrets, a gateway to wisdom. In Akkadian, they called it nemeqi. In Hebrew, Chokmah. In Western languages, wisdom. Not worldly knowledge, but something arriving from elsewhere. People read this text to open that knowledge within themselves. And this belief, the conviction that secrets were hidden within this story, kept the epic alive across the centuries. It transformed it from a mere narrative into a doorway. The earliest written versions of the epic come from the Sumerians. These Sumerian texts, composed between roughly 2,900 BCE, contain 5 separate stories. The common figure is Gilgamesh, but each story stands independently. One tells of the friendship with Enkidu, one of the conflict with Arka, king of Kish, one of the tree of life and the underworld, one of the bull of heaven, one of the death of Gilgamesh himself. It would take centuries for these 5 separate stories to become a single epic. The accumulation of dozens of generations would gradually merge into one voice. That transformation began in the old Babylonian period. Around 1800 BCE, the Sumerians had left the stage, and Semitic peoples had begun to dominate. In this period, the 5 stories were gathered under a single narrative framework, updated, adapted to the understanding of the age. All subsequent versions would rest on this foundation. In the Middle Babylonian period, the epic crossed borders. It was translated into Hurrian, Hittite, and various languages of the region. At Hattusa, the Hittite capital, present-day Boazkoi, texts written in Hittite and Akkadian side by side were discovered. the epic had also become the foundational text for students of cuneiform writing. In Mesopotamian schools, this narrative was the instrument through which writing was learned. Everyone knew it, because everyone had learned to write through it. And then the final great version appeared, the standard Babylonian version. Taking shape between roughly 1200 and 1100 BCE, and written on 12 tablets, this version is the foundation of every translation of Gilgamesh you read today. It was found in Nineveh, in the library of Ashurbanipal. That library belongs to the 7th century BCE, but the story inside it is far older. The Gilgamesh we know today emerged from these tablets. The significance of this version is not merely literary, it is the voice of its age. The 1200s BCE was a period of deep rupture for Mesopotamia. The Aramean migrations had shattered all balances, the Hittite state had collapsed, and great waves of migration had turned the entire region upside down. This ancient civilization was trying to rebuild itself. People were searching for meaning in the midst of chaos. And the Epic of Gilgamesh was rewritten as the text that opened a door to that meaning. Written texts are only one dimension of this story. The oral tradition never fell silent. In Iraq, in Syria, across southeastern Anatolia, Arabs, Kurds, Turks, Assyrians, these stories continued to be passed down by word of mouth. Their forms changed, names transformed, but the essence remained. There are traces in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The story of Baluchia in 1001 Nights is its medieval reflection. At the beginning of the 20th century, a rabbi traveling among the people of Iraq recorded circulating oral epics. Among those recordings was a story called Zmita Katana, a narrative whose essence traced back to Gilgamesh. Its form changed, but its spirit intact. This story has been told for 4,000 years, in different languages, in different eras, in different forms, but always revolving around the same question. What is a human being? What is death? And what meaning can be built between the two? Gilgamesh is old enough, deep enough, and human enough to be our companion in asking that question. We continue to know him. To truly understand Gilgamesh's story, one must first step into his world. And the door to that world opens in the first tablet of the Epic. In the first tablet, Gilgamesh steps onto the stage. He is the king of Uruk. But he is not a good king, not yet. He oppresses his people. His severity knows no bounds. This semi-divine being, 2/3 God and 1/3 human, does not yet know how to carry his power. In the Epic, this state is a starting point. Gilgamesh is like raw material, unworked, unripened, not yet himself. And like all great stories, this one begins at that point. At the beginning, there is not a king on the stage, but a sketch of a human being. In the second tablet, Enkidu enters. Enkidu is Gilgamesh's companion, but only when seen from the outside. In a deeper reading, Enkidu is Gilgamesh's alter ego, his other self. He is a being who lives in wild nature, runs with animals, and has not yet encountered civilization. He goes through a process of domestication, comes to the city, and meets Gilgamesh. At first, they clash, but then they become friends, because they are, in truth, each other's missing pieces. Enkidu tempers the excess in Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh matures the rawness in Enkidu. This friendship is the backbone that carries everything that follows in the Epic. Two separate voices come together in a single rhythm. In the third and fourth tablets, these two figures set out on a journey together. Their destination is the cedar forest. This forest is not merely a geography. It symbolizes the dark corners of the unconscious, the forces the human being has not yet confronted. And the guardian of that forest is Humbaba, a colossal, daunting, overwhelming figure. In the fifth tablet, Gilgamesh and Enkidu confront Humbaba and overpower him. This victory is not merely a physical triumph. It is simultaneously a challenge to the fear and arrogance within. The monster outside is always the shadow of the one within. In the 6th tablet, another force enters, Ishtar. This figure, the goddess of ancient Mesopotamia who carries both love and war, takes an interest in Gilgamesh. But Gilgamesh refuses her offer, and the price of that refusal is steep. Ishtar unleashes the bull of heaven upon Uruk. Gilgamesh and Enkidu fight this bull too and kill it. But the god's revenge does not delay. No matter how powerful the hero, power has its limits. In the 7th tablet, Enkidu falls ill and dies. This scene is one of the heaviest moments in the epic. Gilgamesh walked shoulder to shoulder with his other self for years. Together they faced their fears. Together they struggled. And now that other self is gone. This is not merely the death of a friend, it is the diminishing of a part. But it is also a necessity. Because Gilgamesh can only learn to walk alone in the wake of this loss, the individual cannot be born until the alter ego leaves the stage. In the 8th tablet, there is grief. Gilgamesh mourns Enkidu deeply. This grief is silent, heavy, real. And in this grief, Gilgamesh confronts death for the first time, truly, not only with another's death, but with his own mortality. Because as Enkidu died, he took something with him, Gilgamesh's illusion of immortality. In the 9th tablet, the epic opens onto a new dimension. Gilgamesh decides to seek immortality. This quest is the true beginning of his individual journey. He has lost his alter ego, been left alone with his own voice, left face to face with his own fear. That fear, the fear of death, sets him in motion. He sets out on his journey. He encounters scorpion men, crosses seas, passes through dark mountain tunnels. These images aren't merely adventure. They are symbols of that difficult process of transformation through which a human being must pass. As in all mythic journeys, every danger encountered on this road is a reflection of an inner trial. In the 10th tablet, Gilgamesh makes his final preparations to reach Utnapishtim. He meets a boatman and crosses the waters of death, beyond the known limits of the world. This crossing is both real and metaphorical. Gilgamesh is now outside the ordinary world. Nothing is certain anymore. In the 11th tablet, he finally reaches Utnapishtim. This figure, known as Noah in the Holy Scriptures, is the sole witness to the flood in the epic. He is the surviving voice of that old world swallowed by the waters. And Gilgamesh asks him, "What is the secret of immortality?" Utnapishtim answers. But that answer is not what Gilgamesh expected. Immortality lies hidden as a plant at the bottom of the sea. Gilgamesh finds that plant. But on the return journey, a serpent steals the plant and is gone. Immortality vanishes, like a dream, like everything the human hand tries to hold. In the 12th tablet, Gilgamesh is mortal, and he must accept death. In that acceptance, there is a quiet peace. Because Gilgamesh has learned one thing on this journey, immortality does not exist in this world, but the trace left behind, the city built, the story told, the word carved in stone, can remain. This is the message of the 12 tablets. Simple, hard, and deep. Whatever you do, there is no escape from death. And to accept this is also a form of maturity. Perhaps the end of the greatest journey leads precisely here, to acceptance, to silence, to a human being recognizing their own limits. To truly understand an epic one must enter the mind that created it. And when it comes to the Epic of Gilgamesh, that mind is not the product of just a few writers. It is the product of thousands of years of collective consciousness. Here we must pause and ask, what are the hidden layers of this epic? That is, what is overlooked when it is read as a plain story, but becomes visible when examined carefully. The first layer is this. The relationship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu contains a structure far more complex than we might assume. Some Western scholars have interpreted this relationship as a homoerotic bond. This is debated, But the debate itself is significant because it shows that the bond between these two figures carries an unusual intensity. The true source of that intensity may well be this: the two are two halves of the same person. When Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh does not lose a part of himself, he loses himself. And this loss both breaks and transforms him. A person sometimes grows most deeply when they lose something of themselves. The second layer opens with this question: why a serpent? Why is it a serpent that steals the plant of immortality? In ancient Mesopotamia, the serpent is a symbol with many dimensions. This creature, nesting at the base of the tree of life, moving between the world below and the world above, shedding its skin and being reborn, is simultaneously a symbol of transformation and of loss. Gilgamesh finds immortality but cannot hold it. And this inability to hold is not an accident. This is the fate of the human being. The tradition that created this epic placed it in that scene with great deliberateness. A symbol is not chosen at random. The symbol is the meaning itself. The third layer helps us understand the era of the epic. The standard Babylonian version took shape around the 1200s BCE, at the very heart of a great chaos. Aramaean migrations, Aegean migrations, collapsing states, displaced peoples. A text written in this environment inevitably carries the spirit of the age. The message, "There is no immortality except death," is not a sermon. It is the voice of a consolation, a call to realism, spoken to people stranded in turmoil. To read the text without seeing this dimension is like looking at the page without seeing the line. This rhetoric was not carried by Gilgamesh alone. In roughly the same centuries, other texts were also being written in Mesopotamia, and all of them carried a similar spirit. Ludlul bel nemeqi stands foremost among them. This Akkadian text means something like, "I will praise the Lord of wisdom, let me swear by that wisdom." There is a man who is righteous and upright, but everything goes wrong. The gods fall silent. Help does not come. And that man is forced to learn how to live with this silence. This silence is no different from the silence Gilgamesh faces. Another text is a dialogue known as the Babylonian Theodicy, also surviving from this period. Two people speak, one who suffers, one who cannot understand it. Why does suffering exist? Are the gods just? These questions were also asked in Mesopotamia, and the answers were not certain then either. Certainty was never the point of this text. What mattered was asking the question, because to ask the question is to remain standing without being destroyed. The third text is the Dialogue of Pessimism. This dialogue between a master and a servant addresses the meaninglessness of existence with sharp, gentle irony. The master wants to do something, the servant supports him. Then he changes his mind, the servant supports him again. Everything, every choice appears equally meaningless or equally meaningful. This text is not a pessimist, it is a realist. It is the sound made by a voice that has internalized the chaos of its age and made peace with that chaos. When you place these three texts alongside Gilgamesh, an interesting picture emerges. In all of them, there is a common melancholy. In all of them, there is a common acceptance. In all of them, the human being confronts their limits and tries to emerge from that confrontation unbroken. This is the state of mind of the people of that era. The voice of people searching for meaning in the midst of chaos, who have stopped waiting for answers from the gods, who have turned inward. This voice is familiar today as well, and this voice was not alone. Two texts in the Jewish scriptures also carry traces of this tradition. Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, in Western languages, says, "All is vanity under the sun." This is not a voice of despair. It is a voice of maturity, distilled from thousands of years of Mesopotamian accumulated wisdom. The book of Job also feeds from the same root. A man suffers, asks for meaning, and finds no answer. but he is not destroyed, because asking is also a way of remaining upright. All these texts may never have encountered one another, but they fed from the same waters of humanity, waters of wisdom rising from the depths of Mesopotamia, kneaded by chaos, shaped by loss. These waters flowed for centuries, tablet by tablet, tongue to tongue, age to age, and Gilgamesh is the oldest, most powerful source of those waters. These words carved into clay 4,000 years ago, there is no immortality, but a trace can remain, are still meaningful today. Because the human being is still asking the same question, because silence, that deep silence, falls upon us with the same weight in every age. And Gilgamesh is still standing there, inside that silence, looking toward us, as if he never left. Let us step back now and think about this. Why does Gilgamesh still matter so much today? One answer seems quite simple, because he asks, and the questions he asks have not ended. But the real answer lies deeper. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest known long narrative in human writing. Before it, there were stories, short, fragmentary, scattered. But a narrative of this length, this depth, this wholeness had never been written before. This is the moment when humanity first began to tell its own story. And what it told in that moment was the fear of death, the search for meaning, standing upright inside loss. It is proof that a human being 4,000 years ago felt exactly the same thing as one does today. To say that these themes remain relevant today would itself be an understatement. They were relevant in every age. They will be relevant in every age to come, because these are humanity's inescapable questions. The story of Gilgamesh finds resonance in many fields today, in literature, cinema, philosophy, psychology. Carl Gustav Jung drew from Mesopotamian mythology when developing his concept of the archetype. Joseph Campbell placed Gilgamesh in that great template when defining the hero's journey. Umberto Eco, Salman Rushdie. The traces of this epic are still visible in modern literature. And this influence is not merely intellectual, it is emotional, it is personal. Today there are people reading this epic in every corner of the world. Some are scholars, some are curious readers, and some are simply searching for something, without quite knowing what they are looking for. And most say the same thing. This story felt familiar to me, as if I already knew it. This familiarity is the most powerful evidence of the story's enduring quality. A word carved into clay 4,000 years ago touches something inside a person today. This connection comes from a very deep place, from a very long time ago, because some conditions of being human have never changed. So what remains of Uruk in Iraq today? This site, known as Warka, has hosted archaeological research. German archaeologists have been conducting excavations here since the late 19th century. Among the finds are cuneiform tablets, seals, the remains of temples, and traces of the city's fabric. Today, this site cannot be fully protected due to the political instability in Iraq. Some areas were subject to illegal excavation for years. The remains that have lain waiting beneath the soil for centuries have still not been fully brought to light. We do not yet know what lies beneath this earth. Perhaps thousands more tablets, perhaps cities whose names we do not yet know. This situation carries a tragedy of its own. One of the most important ancient sites in the world is today under inadequate protection. This is not merely an Iraqi matter, it is a human matter. Because Uruk stands not only in a city, but in humanity's shared memory. But it is precisely here that Gilgamesh's own words come into play. At the opening of the epic, it is written, "Look at the walls of Uruk, see them, walk along them, examine their foundation stones." Gilgamesh never reached immortality, but he left behind walls. He left behind this story, and that story still keeps him alive, even centuries later. And this is the very essence of the final lesson the epic wishes to give. Permanence doesn't lie in immortality. It lies in the trace left behind, in the work done, in the story told.